Hey, good morning. And so welcome back to our class on the Middle-Length Lamrim by Lama Tsongkhapa. And so we'll start as we're in a new location today. You probably notice a different background. This is the Poshada room in the Buddha Hall. The first teaching in this location. So we will start as usual with prayers and then do a little bit of meditation on something that we learned about in a recent class.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow, with pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field, endow with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So let's take a few more minutes to make sure we're settled in the present, our body in a comfortable position, but with the back straight. And our mind here and now, not in the past or the future, some other place, thinking about our activities, our work, our problems, and so on. So put all those kinds of thoughts aside and just be in the present moment. Focusing on the breath can help with that because our breathing is happening in the present moment and it has a natural sort of calming effect on the mind. And then for the motivation, if you already generated a bodhicitta motivation earlier today, you can bring that up again, renew that to make sure that your reason for being here is an altruistic one, ideally to benefit all beings without exception, becoming a Buddha to help all beings. And if you haven't already generated a bodhicitta motivation today, you can do that now. Just really try your best to feel that you want to benefit all beings and you want to learn about the path to enlightenment so that you can share this with others and use your knowledge and experience of this path to benefit others. Okay, so for the meditation, recently we looked at some benefits of wisdom, the sixth perfection of the Bodhisattva's path, and Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned benefits related to different practices like the four measurables. And so last time we looked at how wisdom can help with the cultivation of love, loving kindness. So this time let's look at how it can help us with compassion. So Lama Tsongkhapa said that although a bodhisattva has compassion, lasting and intense compassion that cannot bear the suffering of sentient beings, bodhisattvas are without the laziness that is oppressed by sorrow and doesn't delight in virtue. And this is due to their wisdom. So that sounds like the laziness of discouragement, being oppressed by sorrow and not delighting in virtue. And so I think it's particularly important today that we can balance our compassion with wisdom so that we can avoid this problem of feeling oppressed by sorrow and then becoming sort of debilitated, paralyzed when it comes to helping others or even in our own practice. Because there's so many troubles in the world and in our country right now. And as people wanting to follow the Bodhisattva's path, we don't want to close our eyes and turn away from all these troubles, because many people and many sentient beings are suffering. And we feel committed to helping relieve their suffering and helping them become liberated and enlightened. But it is challenging because there's so little we can do right now. So it's easy to fall into feelings of discouragement and hopelessness and then become sort of immobilized in our practice and in our work for the benefit of others. We feel like, well, what's the use? What can I do? I just feel sort of overwhelmed by all that suffering. So maybe you have felt that way at times recently, in recent years, with the different wars that have been going on, and there are just horrific suffering happening in the world, in our country, and so on. So to avoid falling into that kind of trap of discouragement, we can use wisdom. So one example would be to remind ourselves that this is samsara. This is not ultimate wisdom, wisdom of ultimate truth, but just wisdom of conventional truth. Conventionally, we and all other sentient beings, except those who have attained higher states of mind, are in samsara, and it's simply the nature of samsara to be full of troubles, full of dukkha. And so what can we expect? So that's kind of wisdom, using wisdom to just explain to ourselves that it's just natural, it's just normal that there are troubles as long as we're in samsara. And we can also remember impermanence, that samsara and everyone and everything in samsara is subject to change. And the suffering, the dukkha, isn't going to last forever. And we all living beings have the ability to get out of samsara and even reach full enlightenment, Buddhahood, totally beyond all suffering and the causes of suffering. And instead of feeling hopeless, we can look for ways that we can do something. Even if we can't completely eliminate all the problems, we can at least offer some help. For example, making donations to organizations that are there on the ground helping people, like Doctors Without Borders, the World Central Kitchen, and so on. There's many, many organizations helping, bringing direct relief and benefit to those who are suffering. So we can make contributions to their work. They really need that. So that's one way we can help. And also we can just put our energy into our practice, our spiritual practice, cultivate really super strong compassion and love, bodhicitta, wisdom, all the different qualities of a bodhisattva, so that we build up our courage and our determination to keep following this path until we reach enlightenment, helping others along the way, but continuing to work for enlightenment where we can help others, all living beings, in the best possible way. So it's good to recognize when our mind has fallen into these problems of discouragement, hopelessness, and recognize the dangers of such a state of mind. And then use wisdom to pull ourselves back up and renew our commitment to follow the Bodhisattva's path with joyful effort. Do you hear that? It's very soft. Okay. So before we move on, last week I mentioned a question that I had regarding this verse on the top of page 270, where it says Venerable Maitreya also says in his Sublime Continuum. So I brought up a sort of doubt about this, because this verse seems to be talking about the two obscurations as they are explained by the Yogacaras Tantrika Madhyamaka school, whereas I've always heard that text, Sublime Continuum, is a prasangika text. So I wrote to Alex, and he kindly sent an answer, which I'll read. So the name of this text in Sanskrit is Uttara Tantra, Gyu Lama in Tibetan. So he says, as for Uttara Tantra, there are Chittamatra, Yogacara Svatantrika, and prasangika explanations of different parts of it. I haven't actually studied this text. It's not one of the textbooks they study in the monasteries, or at least in the the usual curriculum. But I would like to study it. In the basic program, FMT basic program, they study chapter 1. And Tse-Chin Ling has asked me to do that particular module next year. So I'm going to have to study it and get to know it. But anyway, yeah, so there's different parts of the text that are related to those three schools, Chittamatra, Yogacara, Svatantrika, and Prasangika. So he says, the discussion of Buddha nature fits with Chittamatra very well. The verse you cite, this verse, is Yogacara Svatantrika, since ignorance about the three circles, the three spheres, which is related to the voidness of phenomena, is included in the cognitive obscurations preventing enlightenment. Gelugpa seems to always say that all of what I wrote above is the interpretable level of the text, and that this level leads you on to the definitive interpretation, which is Gelugpa Prasangika. It's interesting that he used that phrase, Gelugpa Prasangika, that we don't normally talk like that. However, it seems that from things I have seen on his website, Study Buddhism, that the other schools like the Kagyu, maybe also the Nyingma, they have other ways of explaining Prasangika. So we always hear the Gelugpa version of Prasangika, which we really think is the one. But yeah, other Tibetan schools explain it differently. It gets very complicated, doesn't it? You need a very amazing mind to be able to unravel all of these. So anyway, yeah, there's different ways that this text and parts of this text can be interpreted. So that is an answer for that question. And then there was another question earlier about virtuous object, which was back on page 265. Middle of page 265, where it said, the nature of meditative stabilization is a mind that abides single-pointedly on any suitable virtuous object. So I questioned that translation because I thought maybe the word virtuous should go with mind rather than object. And so one day at lunch, when Serkar Rinpoche was here, I brought it up. I asked Serkar Rinpoche about this, and his immediate response was, "What is a virtuous object?" And then he picked up his knife, the knife we use to spread butter and so on, and he talked about how this could be used for different things. It could be used in a beneficial way or in a harmful way, right? So he seemed to imply that, objects aren't virtuous or non-virtuous from their own side, but depends on how they're used and the motivation that one has. And then there ensued a discussion. Alex joined in and Simon joined in, Venerable Children joined in. So we had a sort of discussion about this point about virtuous objects and didn't really come to a conclusion. And I did also mention my doubt about how when you look at the list of the objects that are recommended for cultivating shamatha, right? You went through those in volume 4. Some of those objects aren't really virtuous. For example, the 5 aggregates, that's one of the recommended objects. The breath, the 12 links. So how can you say the ugliness of the body, the foulness of the body? So those are objects you can use to cultivate shamatha. Are they virtuous objects? So Alex agreed with me about that, and he sent me a list of objects from a sangha, but I think it's the same list that you find in Lamrim Chenmo and probably also in Volume 4. Like a long, complicated list of different objects. So anyway, we didn't really come to a conclusion at that point, and my question didn't really get answered. So I wrote to two geshis, or almost geshis, that I know, Westerners. One is Geshe Losell, Graham Woodhouse, who's at Nalanda, and asked him the question. And he said he thinks this translation is incorrect. So he, looked at the Tibetan, and he said that, he thought the word virtuous should go with object rather than with mind rather than object. And he also looked at the Lamrim Chenmo, Lama Tsongkhapa's larger Lamrim text, and he said, in the Tibetan of that text, it is very clear that it is not the object that is being referred to as virtuous. And he translated the sentence in that book. He says, it's a virtuous, one-pointed mind that abides without distraction, going to other focal objects. So that was his view, his opinion. And also he gave me the definition of shamatha from Panchen Sonam Drakpa, because he studied at the dialectic school in Dharamsala, which follows the Drepung Loseling curriculum, and they use the text of Panchen Sonam Drakpa. So this is the this is the definition of shamatha, calm abiding. So the definition of shamatha is, it's a meditative stabilization conjoined with pliancy that effortlessly and spontaneously engages its object of observation. No mention of virtuous at all. No mention of virtuous object for shamatha. And he said Jetsunpa's definition is similar. Jetsunpa means Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen, who's the textbook writer for Sarah J. Monastery. So he says no mention of virtuous objects in our system. And he agreed with me that, if we look at that list of objects, there's some that are not virtuous. And then he said, I told him what Serk Rinpoche had said. He said, if an object becomes virtuous merely by being regarded with virtuous intent, then Putin and Trump handshaking in Alaska, you take Ukraine and I'll take Greenland, becomes a virtuous object. But that's true. I mean, if you say, well, if your mind is virtuous, the object becomes virtuous, then you can say, even a terrorist act, if it's regarded by a bodhisattva or by a Buddha. I mean, for a Buddha, there's no negative mind, only love and compassion. So then anything could become virtuous. So that doesn't seem completely satisfying. Mm-hmm. Repeat the definition one more time. The definition of shamatha. This is from Panchen Sonam Drakpa. So he said it's a meditative stabilization. And here he's using, this is Tingedzin, the samadhi. It's the mental factor, the object ascertaining mental factor. So it's a samadhi, we could say, conjoined with pliancy that effortlessly and spontaneously engages its object of observation. So it's just a state of concentration, has pliancy, and it stays with its object of observation effortlessly and spontaneously. So it doesn't mention either the object nor the mind being virtuous. but I think he did agree that the mind... Oh yeah, and then I also wrote to Tenzin Gyatso, who's studying at Sarah and on his way to, I think, becoming a Larampa Geshe. And he said, in all texts I have seen, the understanding is that the mind meditating, either in calm abiding or jhana meaning meditative stabilization, is virtuous, not that the object necessarily is. He says the mind must, by definition, be virtuous because it impels rebirth in a higher realm and brings a desirable result in a future lifetime. So it's a cause of happiness. It's a cause of a good rebirth, so it has to be virtuous. That is the definition of contaminated virtue. If the mind is meditating on the path, it might be uncontaminated, but still virtuous. More so indeed. So anyway, he's saying, yeah, either calm abiding, serenity, shamatha, or jhana, meditative stabilization. So those minds are virtuous. He didn't mention anything about the object, but yeah. I think it's clear that the object doesn't have to be virtuous. Because if you meditate on the skeleton or the impure aspects of the body, the different parts of the body, and you use that to attain shamatha, calm abiding, serenity, it doesn't seem right to say that it's a virtuous object. So anyway, that was that. Any questions about that or comments, stories? Oh, there's one there.
I do have a comment, just that it seems that like meditating on foulness of the body would be a virtuous action if you have lust in your mind and you're using that to counteract the lust. But that in and of itself, it's not virtuous. But that the act of meditating to subdue an affliction would be considered virtuous.
Mm-hmm. Why else? So you're saying that if you're meditating on the foulness of the body to counteract lust, it's virtuous. But if you're not doing that to counteract lust, it's not virtuous? Is that what you said?
That's what, yeah, I'm wondering. That's what
Well,
makes sense to me.
It depends on your motivation. I mean, if you're doing it to cultivate shamatha,
then it would be virtuous.
I think so,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Or if you're doing it as part of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, that's really, I think that's mainly for the purpose of cultivating insight, vipassana, or maybe both, shamatha and vipassana. But yeah, I mean, I can't really, hard to imagine why anybody would do that meditation if they didn't have a virtuous motivation. I suppose if you're just kind of weird, kinky, maybe, thinking about all the guts and so on of the body, enjoy that kind of thing for your own personal pleasure and satisfaction. Possible. I guess that's possible. Anything's possible. But yeah, I mean, if it's done in the context of the Buddhist path, based on teachings of the Buddha, and you're following those teachings, you want to achieve the different qualities mentioned by the Buddha, taught by the Buddha, so you're doing it in that context, then I think it would be virtuous.
I was looking in my notes to see if I could find something more concrete to refer to and didn't, but I think in the explanation you gave from Tenzin Gyatso, he said that the, like having a dhyana, for instance, that would be virtuous karma because it leads to rebirth in an upper realm. And I thought we usually classified that as unfluctuating karma, but is that...
It's virtuous.
Unfluctuating karma is a type of virtuous karma. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's different ways of classifying karma. When, like in the initial scope, they mainly talk about virtuous and non-virtuous. And then there's also neutral, but they don't talk a lot about that. But then when you get to the middle scope, and usually like in the context of the 12 links, the second link of karmic formations, they classify karma somewhat differently. They use, I think it's non-meritorious, meritorious, and then unfluctuating. But both meritorious and unfluctuating karma are virtuous because they are the cause for good rebirths, either in the desire realm or in the two higher realms. Okay, complicated, but good to know. So we will move on now. The next section of the text on page 271, the 4 ways of gathering disciples. So, are you ready for this? Are you ready to start gathering disciples? Yeah, I don't think it really explains here, like, at what point do you start doing this? At what point is this relevant? But I think that, yeah, given the whole idea of bodhicitta, yeah, we want to become a Buddha in order to help all sentient beings, and we want to help them get out of the lower realms, we want to help them get out of samsara, get to liberation from samsara, we want to help them get to enlightenment. So if we have that as our goal, as our aspiration, this is what we want to do, doesn't it seem reasonable that at some point in time you've got to start teaching? Yeah, you have to teach. You have to become a teacher of others. How else will you help them get out of all these unfortunate situations and to more fortunate situations? So it's something to think about, because, you know, there are people who say, no, I don't want to be a teacher, I don't want to be a teacher, I can't teach. So I mean, I can understand that, you know, like maybe right now, or maybe even in this lifetime, yeah, not everybody feels inclined to become a teacher. And I don't think that is necessary. But thinking more long term, right, realistically, if you do see that as your goal, helping all sentient beings get to enlightenment, I think, you know, it's good to think, well, at some point I will have to start being a teacher and gathering disciples. Does that make sense? But then it's also, then there's also the case of some people who are extremely eager to become teachers. Maybe before they're really ready. So it's a little unclear sometimes, like, well, you know, how do you become a teacher? At what point do you become a teacher? And just to illustrate this, one time I was in, where was I? Yeah, I was in India attending some teachings by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I was with a friend, Mary Colony, who worked for many years in the FPMT education office, helping to develop the different education programs. So we were walking on a path, talking, and I think in front of us was this Lama named Lama Munlam. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's quite popular in Europe, especially with Italians. Italians just loved him, and so he was walking along with a whole big group of Italian devotees, and just having a great time. And Mary told me a story about him that I hadn't heard before. So I don't know his whole story, but he was, I think he was a monk since he was a small child, and then when the whole disruption happened in Tibet, and many people left Tibet and went to different places and did different things. It seems that he didn't continue his studies. He didn't finish his studies and become a geshe, but he spent a long time in retreat in Nepal, in a place called Parping. Some of you may have been there. It's, considered a holy place connected with Vajrayogini. So he stayed there for maybe, 20 years, a long, long, long time, meditating, doing retreat. And then at some point, I don't know how it happened, but some Italian students who were visiting Nepal met him and just, felt great devotion, and they wanted to invite him to teach. They wanted to bring him to Italy to teach. And he hadn't done that before. He'd never been a teacher. And by that time, I don't know how old he was, maybe 60, in his 60s, or even in his 70s, or, quite advanced in years. And he said, "Oh, but I have to get permission from my teacher, but my teacher has already passed away." So, he didn't know what to do, but he didn't want to teach. The point is, he didn't want to teach without getting permission, despite all his years of monastic life and retreat and study and so on. He didn't feel comfortable to just say, "Okay, yeah, I'll come and teach." But he did eventually write to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama says, "Yes, of course you can teach." And so then he did. He started, going to Italy and a few other countries and teaching. And Mary made the comment that, in her experience working in the FPMT education office, there are some students who do the so-called it's called a Discovering Buddhism program, which lasts 2 years, and you learn some basic things, and then they want to become a teacher after just 2 years of learning some basic things. They want to be a teacher. So, it's good to have the wish to become a teacher, but you really do have to check what is your motivation and how much Dharma you really know. And traditionally, what Lama Munlam wanted to do was correct. You get permission from your teacher. You don't just set yourself up as a teacher, right? On your own. That's not the traditional way of doing. And so I think here in the Abbey, that's how it is here. Venerable children will determine when someone is ready to go and start teaching. And you start little ways, leading motivations for the morning practice, leading meditations, leading discussion groups, giving BBCs. So you start small ways like that, And then when you're a little more advanced, going out and giving talks in outside venues, usually with a senior. So I think it's really good that there's a junior and a senior teaching together, so that the senior can sort of guide the junior. So it's a gradual progression, with guidance along the way. So that's, I think that is the traditional way of becoming a teacher. Getting permission, or even getting told by your teacher to teach, and rather than just doing it on your own. So in this life, even if you don't become a teacher sitting on a throne like the Tibetans, but you can have opportunities to start giving talks, giving teachings, helping others learn the Dharma. And as Venerable Gyatso said to me yesterday, I don't remember the exact words, but teaching Dharma is one of the best ways of learning. And that's definitely my experience. I'm sure all of you as well. When you have to explain something to others, clearly, then you have to really understand it yourself. And so it really helps you get more clear about your understanding, your knowledge, yeah. And then when people ask questions, which usually happens with Western people, then then that's really challenging. Sometimes you never thought of that before. You don't know the answer. You have to look it up. And that helps you to increase your knowledge, increase your experience. My first big teaching assignment, I had given a few little talks here and there, but then when I was living in a Dharma center in England, and we were doing the so-called Geshe studies program. So we were starting to study things that they study in the monasteries, like mind and awareness, and then Tariq, signs and reasons, and so on. And our teacher was Khyentse Jampa Tekchok, wonderful, wonderful teacher. And so I was in the first cohort of students for this program. So we did our first year. And then in the second year, we were in our second year, and another batch of students, another cohort started. So Khyentse Jampa Tekchok, taught both cohorts. And then the third year came along, and it was too much for him to teach the third year. He couldn't teach 3 groups at a time, because we had classes 5 days a week, 2 hours at a time. It was pretty intensive. And so then he asked some of us in the first year cohort to teach. So I was asked to teach tenets of, the philosophical systems. And I was like, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I was, I can't do that. And he pushed me, and I could also see that, it was important for somebody to do that, and I was, somebody who could do that because I had already studied it. And so I did. So I embarked. It was 3 months, 5 days a week, teaching tenets, which I barely understood myself. But he was incredibly kind. He gave me time. So I would go to him almost every day with a list of questions, things I didn't understand. And he and the translator would help me so that I could explain it to others. But it was very much a case of being sort of pushed, gently, kindly. But it was very, a really good experience. It really helped me have a better understanding of that topic. Because it's one thing when you're just sitting there and listening and writing it down and, this is interesting, and I think I understand it. But when you have to explain it to others, it's like, wow, and they ask very challenging questions. Venerable Rabina was in my class, she was like so I'm sure she asked some very challenging questions. And it's a great way to learn. So try not to think, no, not me, I will never be a teacher, I can't do that. You're depriving yourself of a very valuable opportunity. But you can still put it off for the future. You don't have to think right away, anytime soon. You can think in the future, eventually, I would like to do that. So,
just to share, Venerable Rubina commented that those years of the Geshe trainings program had benefited her the whole life. Mm-hmm. And what she now teaches is based on the basics of the tenets and all those.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. I'm glad she... she's certainly a very dedicated, committed student. Dedicated to the Dharma and sharing the Dharma all over the world. She really does go all over the place. Okay, so here we have the 4 ways of gathering disciples. And so these are mentioned in the first paragraph. The first one is generosity. So it says generosity is the same as explained in the context of the perfections, the perfection of generosity. And the second one is pleasant speech. This is to teach the perfections to disciples. And third is meaningful conduct. This is to encourage disciples to engage in the meanings they were taught or to induce them to correctly adopt them. And then fourth is to act in accord with the meaning, is to abide in the meanings one has introduced to others and train accordingly. So I kind of, summarized them up here. And then there's a verse from the Ornament for the Mahayana Sutras, which says, this is Maitreya, Venerable Maitreya, generosity is as before, that's the first one, while teaching it, that's the second one, making others adopt it, that's the third one, and then engaging in it oneself, the fourth one. So these are asserted respectively to be pleasant speech, meaningful conduct, and accord with the meaning. No, you left out the first one in the last two lines. Anyway, so there's more information in the next paragraph. So why are the means of gathering disciples specified as four? Oh, so one other thing, these 4 ways of gathering disciples, this outline comes from page 246. If you go back to 246, right in the middle of the page, it says, how to train in the conduct in general. So this is talking about Bodhisattva's conduct, how to train in Bodhisattva's conduct. And that has 2 points, training in the perfections that ripen one's own Buddha qualities, and training in the 4 ways of gathering disciples that ripen the minds of others. So these are like the 2 branches or 2 types of Bodhisattva conduct. First is the perfections, the 6 perfections, which we just went through. And those are for the purpose of ripening the Buddha qualities in oneself. So ripening one's own Buddha qualities, like generosity, ethics, and so on. So it's, even though, when engaging in those practices, especially generosity and ethics, they are benefiting others. They do benefit others, but it seems that the primary purpose is yourself, your own mind, cultivating those qualities in yourself, developing generosity until you can have the generosity of a Buddha, just, willing to give everything without any hesitation, and ethics, practicing that until it's totally pure. So the 6 perfections are said to be mainly for your own development of the qualities you need to be a Buddha. And then when it comes to benefiting others, benefiting sentient beings, there are these 4 ways of gathering disciples. So these are to ripen the minds of others, to help other sentient beings to get onto the path, follow the path, and reach Buddhahood. Okay, so then, so why are the means of gathering disciples specified as 4? In order to gather a retinue for the sake of introducing them to virtue, right? So that phrase is important. Introducing them to virtue, that's what we want to do to help others. We don't want them to just have a good time, be happy. Of course, we do want them to be happy, but mainly what we want them to do is create the causes for happiness, virtue. Yeah, so we have to show them how to create virtue, so they will create the causes for happiness in their future lives and so on up to enlightenment, and refrain from non-virtue. Yeah, we have to teach them how to stop creating the cause of suffering, sending themselves to lower rebirths, creating for themselves terrible suffering. So that's what we want to help. what we want to do to help others. Okay, so in order to gather a retinue for the sake of introducing them to virtue, they first need to be joyful, make them happy. For this purpose, 1, give them gifts of material things and benefit their bodies. Okay, so that's the first way of gathering disciples. It sounds like bribing, doesn't it? It depends on your intention, right? Depends on why, somebody, giving a bribe in order to get them to do something non-virtuous or do something just for your benefit. That's not good. That's not virtuous. But if your motivation is bodhicitta, you have love and compassion, you see how sentient beings are suffering, and it's mainly because they're confused, they don't understand what's good and what's bad, what's virtuous and non-virtuous, and they don't see their potential. So you really sincerely want to benefit them. You want to get them out of suffering. You want to get them to higher and higher forms of happiness. That's your real motivation, and that is the motivation a bodhisattva has. So they want to attract them. It's important for others to feel good with you. They want to be with you. Then they'll listen to you, right? They're more likely to listen to you if they have a good feeling about you, right? So you do things that they help them feel good. Give them little gifts. And, do things that make them happy. So you've probably had this experience of receiving gifts from teachers. And even if it's just, a little piece of candy or a little trinket or, something very small. But if it's given to you by your teacher, someone you respect, someone you just, wow, then it becomes really, really special. One time when Lama Zopa was visiting Singapore, and I was just with him privately, he gave me a crystal pig. I don't know the story behind that, if someone had given it to him, or sometimes he would go out and, go to shopping malls and buy things, not for himself, but to give. And I think, in Chinese, not astrology, but the zodiac, yeah, pig is one of the 12 animals, yeah, I don't know what it symbolizes, but, in our culture, pigs are, they're kind of dirty animals. Huh?
Intelligence.
Yeah, they're intelligent. Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard there was a pig in the Atlanta Zoo that came up. Yeah, when you guys were visiting and wanted to be petting zoo, listening to your mantras, very intelligent. So anyway, but in the West, we have these other ideas about pigs, that they're dirty and blah. But yeah, so so it's a little bit, how do I feel about this? A crystal pig. What do I do with it? In the end, I put it in my mandala, mainly because where it came from. It was given to me by one of my teachers, who I highly respect. So, those things take on kind of special meaning. And maybe if they give you a piece of candy, you don't even want to eat it. You put it somewhere, put it on a shelf, and, after a few years, it's all moldy. But yeah, it's a cause of joy, and feeling close. Oh, how kind of my teacher to think of me and to give me this gift. So it does have the effect of bringing you closer, drawing you closer to them. But also in the monasteries in Tibet, and probably other Asian countries as well, sometimes when disciples came, sometimes they were little kids, or they may have been older, but in many cases they were like penniless. They didn't have anything. And the teacher's responsibility was not just teaching them Dharma, but giving them food, providing them with their meals and clothes, and giving a place to stay, and so on. So again, this is a way of having a very close relationship, and then the disciple will feel the kindness of their teacher and be more likely to listen when they teach and follow their advice. Yeah, so that's the first way, is giving them material things, and he says here, benefiting their bodies, right? So if the disciple is sick, then the teacher will give medicine, or give them money to buy medicine, or whatever. Then it says, once they have become joyful in that way, in order for them to engage in the path, they first need to know how. For that, number 2, explain the Dharma to them by speaking pleasantly, so that they eliminate ignorance and doubts and make them understand the meaning unmistakenly. Okay, so this is the real purpose of giving gifts, is to draw them close, open their minds, and then you can explain the Dharma, teach them advice. And that needs to be done in a skillful way according to each person's situation. If it's just a little kid, you don't start explaining the most high advanced teachings. You teach them little things that they can start practicing. And likewise, we're living in a place where there's very few Buddhists and very few people who probably would become Buddhist. But we can still share Dharma with people, like people who may come here, or workers who come here. And if we get into a conversation and they talk about some problem they're having, we can just offer them kindness and maybe some little advice that might be helpful for them. It doesn't have to be Buddhist, but something that will be helpful. So that's a way of speaking pleasantly and helping them understand the Dharma, even if we don't use Dharma terminology, but sharing what we have learned with others that will hopefully be beneficial for them. And then, when they understand that, number 3, cause them to engage in accomplishing virtue through meaningful conduct. So, you guide them not just to have knowledge, intellectual knowledge of the Dharma, but how to practice it, how to put it into practice, how to make changes in themselves and their lives and their attitudes and so on, so that they are practicing the Dharma. Then it says, furthermore, if you do not practice that yourself, but merely explain it to others, this is how you should engage and desist, they will say, why do you tell others to practice it if you do not practice it yourself? You too still need to be corrected by others, and they will not listen to what is to be practiced. However, if you practice that yourself, they will also think, since he himself abides in the virtue in which he guides me, there will definitely be benefit and happiness for me if I accomplish it, and they will enter the path. So we need to practice what we preach, or walk your talk, that expression, yeah? We know, we probably all have experience of being on the other side of that, somebody, a teacher or a parent or an adult, and, they're telling us what to do, but we can see that they're not doing it themselves. So how does that affect our mind? It's like, I'm not going to listen to you. So, yeah, it's so important that we ourselves practice what we are teaching to others. We be a good example, a role model for them, and then they will definitely practice themselves, or they will at least try. And it says also, those who are already on the path will not turn away from it and will grow firm. So I think, yeah, if a teacher doesn't act in accordance with with what they're teaching, then even those who are already engaged in practice, they might become completely disillusioned. That does happen, right? like practicing Buddhists, people who've been practicing Buddhism, and then there's some kind of scandal, some teacher misbehaving, and then they just say, forget it, I'm not following this path. Well, that sadly happens to people. Therefore, you should, number 4, act in accordance with the meaning. Okay, then it says, since the Buddhas taught that the 4 ways of gathering disciples accomplish all the welfare of all disciples and that they are a good method, those who gather followers should rely on them. Ornament for the Mahayana Sutras says, those who gather followers perfectly rely on this method. It accomplishes all the aims of everyone and is extolled as an excellent method. And then the great elder Atisha taught the way to accomplish the 6. I think maybe that's the end of that section on the 4 means of gathering disciples. And then from here on, it's more like a conclusion to this whole section of Bodhisattva conduct. So it says, the great elder Atisha taught the way to accomplish the 6 perfections during meditative equipoise and post-meditation in his heart summary. Bodhisattva conduct includes the vast 6 perfections and so forth. The yogi arising from meditative equipoise steadfastly accomplishes the path of accumulation. So then that's explained below. In this way, the beginner bodhisattva who has taken the vows of the victor's children and abides on the path of accumulation never passes beyond the 6 perfections, whether in meditative equipoise or in post-meditation. So that sounds pretty amazing, doesn't it? So whether they're in meditation, right, deep meditation, or outside of meditation, they never not practice the 6 perfections. So what I remember is when studying the ornament, and we had some classes in this, there's one of the bodhisattva practices. It's called an achieving of armor, and the word armor is used because just as even nowadays, the soldiers wear protective clothing to protect themselves from bullets or spears or arrows of the enemy. So in a similar way, bodhisattva needs to protect themselves not from sentient beings, but from their own afflictions, from afflictions in their mind. So on the path of accumulation, you haven't yet abandoned any afflictions. They're still there in your mind. That's the first of the 5 paths. When do you achieve the path of accumulation? What's the right, so it's when a person has uncontrived bodhicitta after meditating on the methods for cultivating bodhicitta for a long time, and then it just starts arising naturally, spontaneously. You don't have to make any effort to feel bodhicitta or generate a bodhicitta motivation. It's just natural, spontaneous, effortless. So that's the point where you enter the path of accumulation, and that's the point where you really become a bodhisattva. The term bodhisattva only applies to those who have reached that point. So it said in the Ornament for Clear Realizations that from that point on, a bodhisattva has this thing called achieving of armor. And the meaning of it is that they practice all 6 perfections all the time within each perfection. So we talked a little bit about that, like when you're practicing generosity, giving a gift. At the same time, you practice ethics and patience and joyous effort and concentration and wisdom. And when you're practicing patience, then at the same time, you're practicing generosity and so on. So you practice all 6 perfections together in a comprehensive way with each perfection. So that starts from the path of accumulation. So that's probably what's being referred to here. That a bodhisattva is never without all the 6 perfections. They're practicing all of them in a comprehensive way. And he says, therefore, some of the 6 perfections are maintained in meditative equipoise, and some in post-meditation. Meditative stabilization, which is shamatha, and the perfection of wisdom, which is special insight, are partially cultivated in meditative equipoise. I was a little puzzled by the partially cultivated, but I think because, they're mainly to cultivate meditative stabilization or concentration. You mainly do that in meditation. And likewise, wisdom, you mainly do that in meditation. But I think partially means that you also do it in other activities. As a bodhisattva, you also try to maintain concentration while you're giving, while you're practicing ethics, while you're practicing patience, and so on. So a bodhisattva needs to learn how to keep their mind focused on what they're doing at any given moment and not have it wandered away. So concentration or meditative stabilization is then cultivated both when you're sitting, doing formal meditation, but also outside of meditation. And the same with wisdom. The achievement of wisdom really happens in meditative equipoise. But outside of that, when we're practicing other things like giving and so on, we're supposed to think of the emptiness of the 3 circles, the 3 spheres, the giver, the recipient, the gift, the act of giving. So all the different aspects of the action are all empty of inherent existence. So even outside of formal meditation, a bodhisattva is still maintaining their understanding of emptiness and cultivating wisdom. Does that make sense? And then wisdom, as we've seen, it doesn't only refer to wisdom of ultimate truth, ultimate reality, but also wisdom about conventional things like how to fix a car, how to do tech, how to cook, and so on. Just knowledge and skill with different kinds of activities, to making sure we're doing things correctly, properly, as they should be done. And that's also included in the Bodhisattva's wisdom. The first 3 perfections and some elements of meditative stabilization and wisdom are maintained in post-meditation, when you're outside of meditation. Joyous effort occurs both in meditative equipoise and in post-meditation. So that's something we need at all times with all 6 perfections. One type of patience, out of the 3 types of patience, some mental states of certainty regarding the profound Dharma also occur during meditative equipoise. Do you remember the 3 types of patience? Or fortitude? You can use your own words for them. Not retaliating to harm, so learning how to not react and retaliate when someone harms us, and putting up with hardships, and it's certainty about the Dharma. So that's what he's talking about here. That type of patience also occurs during meditative equipoise. Yeah, so some mental states of certainty regarding the Dharma also. Yeah. So anyway, saying here that, yeah, of the 6 perfections, some are practiced outside of meditation, some are practiced in meditation, and some are practiced in both situations. The great elder Tisha said in his concise method for accomplishing the Mahayana path, each time you rise from meditative equipoise, cultivate a view of all phenomena as like illusions, such as the 8 similes. So the 8 similes are these different kind of examples used to illustrate how things are like illusions. In the notes it says magic tricks. Yeah, it's like the magician who causes a stick to look like an elephant and so on. That's one. Dreams, that's we all have experience of. Mirages, mirror reflections, shadows. I don't remember coming across that one. Shadows. Yeah, I guess a shadow can look like a person if the light isn't very clear. Echoes, we probably have experience of that as well. Reflections in water, they always talk about the moon reflected in water. And if it's like really still lake or something and the moon is reflected in that, we might think, oh, the moon is there in the lake. And then 8 is emanations. Not sure what that means. Maybe, yeah, people have the ability to create emanations that look like things that aren't. In post-meditation, so during meditation, we cultivate this view that everything is like an illusion. Then in post-meditation, purify conceptuality and emphasize the training and method. At the time of meditative equipoise, balance, shamatha, and special insight, and cultivate them continuously. This is like the whole Bodhisattva's practice in a condensed way. For those whose minds are untrained, to hear about such wonderful but difficult conduct produces anguish. Anyone ever feel anguish about the Bodhisattva's practice? I don't think I could do that. Although even bodhisattvas are unable to take it as practice right from the start, if you come to understand it and acquaint yourself with it as something to aspire to, later on you will naturally engage in it without effort. Yeah, so instead of getting discouraged and thinking, oh, I can't do that, that's too hard, and then turn away, then to think, well, okay, little by little, if I start practicing a little bit now, do what I can do now, and then aspire to do more in the future, then you're creating the causes to be able to do that. He says, naturally, without effort. That is why familiarization is important. For if you see it as impossible and refuse to familiarize yourself with training your mind in it, you will be extremely far from the completely pure paths. So, yeah, if we just get familiar with the bodhicitta motivation and the practices, just do what we can and get familiarize ourselves with those, then slowly they start to become more natural. And eventually they'll become effortless. Praise of Infinite Qualities says, practices that distress worldly beings, even just hear about them, and that even you have never practiced for an extended time, will become natural to you through gradual familiarization with those practices. Hence, it is hard to increase excellent qualities without familiarity. And therefore, those who have taken bodhisattva vows must train in the conduct. But even those who have not taken up engaged bodhicitta by means of a ritual should try to develop the desire to train in it. The vows will be very stable if they are taken after enhancing one's delight in the training. Therefore, you should put effort into this. So wherever we're at, whether we've taken the Bodhisattva vows or not, but if we think, yeah, this is something I would want to do, it's really worthwhile, it's really valuable, I want to do it in the future, then just having that aspiration will bring us eventually to that point where we're able to take the Bodhisattva vows with a sense of certainty. Yeah, I really want to do this. I'm really going to try my best to do this. This concludes the explanation of training in aspiring bodhicitta and the stages of the path of training in the conduct of the victor's children in general within the stages of the path of persons of great capacity. Okay, so we're still on that part of the Lamrim of great persons of great capacity, which is all about bodhicitta and the bodhisattva's path. So we've covered that in a general way, and what comes next, shamatha and special insight. So here, the rest of the text is going into more detail with how to cultivate shamatha, calm abiding, serenity, and special insight, which is the translation of vipassana. And so, I don't know, there's just 10 minutes left. We could start on this, or does anyone have any question you want to ask about?
I'm a little bit confused. You had said that the first 3 of the perfections are more about training our own mind, something like that. And then that's different from the 4 ways of gathering disciples, and that's to benefit others. Did I understand that correctly?
No, I think what I said was all the 6 perfections. The outline in the text, going back to page 246, the outline is talking about bodhisattva conduct, and that is divided into 2. The 6 perfections, which are practiced mainly for developing the qualities in oneself. And then the 4 means of gathering disciples are mainly to ripen others' qualities. So the first 6, all 6 perfections are mainly for one's own development of, all the things we need to become a Buddha. And then when it comes to helping others, it's the 4 means of gathering disciples. And I think I used the word mainly because I said that, but when we're practicing the 6 perfections, at least some of those do benefit others, like giving, or giving, it does benefit others. But according to the way it's explained here, the Bodhisattva is practicing giving to develop that quality in their mind, perfect their quality of generosity in order to become a Buddha. So that's how it's explained in the outline, that it's to develop one's own Buddha qualities.
Okay, so is the difference then in the generosity of the first of the 6 perfections and the generosity of the first of the 4 ways to gather disciples, is that mainly just motivation?
Yeah, it does mention here the first of the 4 means of gathering disciples is generosity, and it says that is as explained before. Yeah, generosity is the same as explained in the context of the perfections. So I think I guess he's saying here that, well, how do you practice that first of the 4 means of gathering disciples? Do it as it was explained earlier. But here it's more in the context of, getting people attracted to you, feeling good with you, for the purpose of then teaching them the Dharma. Your purpose is, I want to teach you the Dharma. I want to make a connection with you. They say a bodhisattva is always wanting to make connections with people. Because if they make a connection with people, even if it's just giving a piece of candy to a child, yeah, sooner or later that connection will ripen, and that, they'll be able to help that person on the path. So bodhisattvas are always wanting to make connections with others to guide them to enlightenment. So giving is one of the ways, that's the first way to make connection with them. Because you don't immediately start teaching the Dharma. You want to kind of make a connection with them, a positive connection, make them feel good with you, feel attracted to you, remember you. Yeah. So like, a teacher, a lama giving a sweet to a little kid, yeah, that child will probably remember that person. Oh, yeah, that's the one who gave me that piece of candy. And so, there's this connection, this imprint left in their mind. And then maybe later when the kid grows up, they'll want to learn Dharma from them. But if they hadn't made that connection earlier on, there's maybe less chance that would happen. So, yeah, I guess you could say in the context of the 6 perfections, it's done in a different way for a different purpose. Well, maybe not. Because you think even in the context of the 6 perfections, a bodhisattva would be thinking, I want to make connection with others, with this child, with this animal, with this homeless person. I want to connect with them so that eventually I'll be able to teach them the Dharma. And that connection may not ripen in that life, it may ripen in a future life. But like when, giving a bit of blood to a mosquito, that's giving, right? And it's good to think, and this is what I try to think. I think, okay, now I'm giving you a drop of blood, but in the future I want to give you Dharma. So in that way you're at least hopefully establishing a connection, and then sometime, not this life probably, this lifetime, but in a future life, that mosquito might be born in a situation and you make a connection, and then you're able to teach them the Dharma. So I think, even when the Bodhisattva is practicing giving in the context of ripening their own Buddha qualities, they're probably also practicing it as part of those 4 means of gathering disciples. So it's not like those 2 groups are totally separate and disconnected. Maybe this overlap there. And also giving the Dharma. That's one of the 3 ways of giving. Yeah. So when they're teaching the Dharma, they are practicing giving in the context of ripening their own Buddha qualities, but also practicing it to ripen the minds of others.
So when the Bodhisattva on the path of accumulation, when they practice these 6 perfections, it's like a similitude, not the actual perfections, right? And then...
Wait a minute. Let's see, I'm trying to remember how it goes. There's differences between the Svatantrikas and the Prasangikas, how they explain the perfection. So the Svatantrikas would say what you just said, that only a Buddha has the actual perfections. The actual 6 perfections only exist at the time of Buddhahood. And bodhisattvas are practicing, I think they use the word similitude. Yeah, it's like a similitude of the perfections. But according to Prasangika, do you remember how it goes? I think they do. Prasangikas say, the bodhisattvas do have the actual perfections, but they're not fully complete. They only become like fully complete or fully perfected when they are Buddhas.
Need the direct realization of emptiness to make it a perfection.
Okay, that's also, there seem to be different...
That's Svatantrika as well.
No, I have, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, some explanation, I can't remember where, but some explanations say that what makes it a perfection is the bodhicitta motivation. So like the difference between, a philanthropist giving $1 million and a bodhisattva giving $1. They're both giving, but you probably, the philanthropist giving probably isn't the perfection of giving. If they don't have the bodhicitta motivation, right? It's giving, it's virtuous, but it's not the perfection of giving. Whereas a bodhisattva, they're giving with the motivation of bodhicitta to attain enlightenment, to help all sentient beings. So that makes it the perfection of giving. So that's said in some contexts, but in other books and so on, they say that to make it a perfection, it also needs to be conjoined with wisdom. I don't think it has to be direct realization of emptiness, but just, the wisdom of emptiness, like understanding no inherently existing giver and so on. So that also, so there's probably different commentaries over the centuries since the Buddha's time, and different opinions who say what is required for it to be a perfection. Sometimes they just say bodhicitta motivation, but sometimes they say bodhicitta and wisdom. So I've come across both explanations. Did that answer the question? Okay, now we have run out of time. So we'll dedicate the merit, the positive energy, share it with all mother sentient beings.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lusang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.